Jacob Burton here from StellaCulinary.com. In our previous videos, we went through and created some Neapolitan pizza dough. And here I want to show you our setup that we're using to create our Neapolitan pizzas in front of our wood fire here. So as you can see on my table here, I have a board with my mise en place set up. Here is our Neapolitan dough that we made in our previous video. Now the importance of this board is to allow us to transfer the dough onto our peel using a minimum amount of flour, because once we put it on the deck of the oven, it's going to be extremely hot, so any excess flour is going to char. Now you can see in the oven that we have started a fire and we have banked the fire over to the left-hand side, and you want your deck to be at least 750 degrees Fahrenheit minimum. Now, with this banked fire, I'm now going to add some small logs that I have off to the side of the wood fire that I hand selected. So this is hand selected hardwood, and I picked the size to allow me specifically to stoke the live fire so I can maintain my heat without my heat jumping up too quickly. So I'm going to take my Polino, going to bank the fire over to the left, getting all my coals up off my deck as much as possible. Going to place a log, and the whole idea with this log is I want to be able to get a flame that comes up and over the top of the dome, acting as a broiler. So that's going to cook the top of my pizza, that flame that's licking up over the top of the dome. So you really need that live fire. So we're going to go ahead and set that there. So as you can see here, we now have the flame licking up over the top of the dome, and that's going to give us our broiler effect for finishing our pizzas. I'm going to give the deck one final brush. Now this deck has already, again, we've pushed the fire, the coals off to the side, we've brushed the deck with our wire brush. Then we take this wire brush and we wrap it in a damp towel and we mop the ash off of the deck, and that's what's giving us our nice clean deck. So as you can see right now, the middle of our oven is about 790 degrees Fahrenheit, which is perfect. You really don't want to go lower than 750 degrees Fahrenheit because you're going to ruin the authenticity of the pie. It's not going to cook fast enough to be a true Neapolitan. So 780, 790 is good. So the first pizza we're going to make is a traditional margherita. Now you want to make sure that when you're dusting with flour, you're using double-aught pizza flour. Any other flour is going to char and become bitter at the high temperatures at which you're cooking the Neapolitan pizza. So bread flour, all-purpose flour, none of those will work. Lay down the flour. Now right here, the skin that's formed during proofing, that needs to be the bottom when it hits the peel. And that's going to give you a nicer crust. So make sure you're keeping track of where this top is. So the top will be your bottom. Doesn't necessarily matter when you're forming it, but when you put this on the peel and load it into your oven, you want to make sure you're keeping track of that. So I'm going to gently peel this away, lay it down, a little bit of flour on top. Flour both sides. And degas. Now I'm using the pads of my fingers and I'm pressing gently. Now I don't want to use my fingertips because that's going to create dimple marks in the dough, which we don't want. So I'm going to press the gas in this dough out into the edge, and that's going to be the start of our crust. It's going to form what you call a Cornichon, which is going to be our crust. Flip it over. Again, pressing out. Now any bubble that develops like this, where you can see it's a flimsy bubble where there's a lot of air in it, I'm just going to pinch that off, okay? Because what will happen is it's going to become too thin when it expands, and it'll burn. So I'm pressing the air out into my crust. So now you can see I have a disc with a raised edge. Now when you get to the point where the palm of your hand can fit in that center of the dough, it's now time to open the dough by stretching. So you never want to roll the dough when you're making pizza, but especially Neapolitan, because it's going to affect your texture. Now the movement for this is you want to pull gently. So again, I'm not using my fingertips, I'm using the pads of my fingers. That way I'm not creating crease marks. So I'm just putting the pads of my fingers and I'm pulling gently till I hit resistance on that crust. I'm flipping it over my hand, doing a quarter turn, so now this portion of the crust, which was right here at 9 o'clock, is now down at 6 o'clock. I'm going to do that again. Down to 6 o'clock. So 9 o'clock, down to 6 o'clock. Now, what you'll do is you'll build up a rhythm. And it's important so at first you need to go slow to get the feel of it. But the more rhythmic you get with it, the more centrifugal force you build. And what's happening is as I'm whipping that dough around, the weight of the crust is allowing the dough to expand in the direction of least resistance. So that way you're not getting any tear marks. Okay, so I'm going to build up a little bit of a rhythm here, just going through. So 9 to 6, 9 to 6. And you're looking for about a 12-inch disc. Now once I have my 12-inch disc, now I'm going to move it off to my board to top. Now in traditional Neapolitan pizza restaurants, this would be a marble slab with a raised edge that allows you to fit a board in. So you can offload, and that's our hack, okay? So if I went straight from here to my board, there would be way too much excess flour, and it's gonna burn. So at this point, you need to top quickly. And Neapolitan pizzas are all about sparse toppings. So we're gonna go down with our San Marzano sauce, spread that out, and we're gonna make a basic margherita pizza. Now for me, I like my basil to be fresh, so we're gonna top with basil at the end. If you want your basil to be charred, you can put it on now. So the tomato portion of the margherita, so margherita pizza is fresh mozzarella, tomato, and basil. The tomato portion comes from the sauce. You'll see a lot of people actually put chunks of tomato on their margherita, which is fine if that's how you like it, but it's not classic. So I'm using fresh mozzarella because fresh mozzarella is what's traditional for margherita, and that's it. Again, we're going to top with the basil when this pizza's done. Little dusting of flour on my board, give it a wipe, and I'm wiping off that excess. That's just to make sure that I'm taking off any sort of moisture that's on this board that's going to cause this pizza to stick. Pull the pizza gently onto the board, so that's our transfer. Reshape. I'm going to take the pizza, and I'm aiming middle right. Now, it's one fluid motion, tip down, pull back to offload. So tip down, pull back, offload. That's it. Now from here, your pizza needs to cook in under 90 seconds. I'm going to switch to my Polino, and I'm looking for air bubbles that get trapped underneath the crust. Now if that happens, I'm going to lift up the edge of that crust to allow those air bubbles to escape. That way I'm getting a full contact of the crust on the deck of my oven. And what I'm looking for here is this crust to start to get a dark golden brown before I go to rotate. Now the moment that I put this pizza down on this deck, it zapped energy heat from the deck. So when I go to rotate this pizza, I want to make sure I'm putting it exactly back on the same spot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the bottom, going to pick up, I'm going to pull the Polino towards me, and then push it back. I'm pushing it back to the exact same spot. And you can see that Cornichon is raising very nicely, and that's from us pressing the gas outward when forming the pizza crust. You can look on the bottom, we have a nice leoparding. It's exactly what you want. Our crust is almost done. So at this point, we're going to finish by doming. 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, done. Domed. Offload. Now to finish it and to make it a true margherita, we're just going to throw on some torn basil. And so the margherita is supposed to represent the Italian flag. So you want to make sure that you have the spacing of, so you can see the red, the melted white of the mozzarella, and the torn basil. You can put a little whole leaf right there as a garnish if you like. Now traditionally, Neapolitan pizzas are not sliced. They're just served whole on the plate like this, and they're eaten with a knife and fork, commonly served with a little bit of chili oil in some restaurants. Now you can also slice this if you want to share it with friends, that's fine, obviously. But that's the tradition. And just come down. And normally, for this style of pizza, I'm going to slice it into 6 slices. Again, offload on the bottom. Now you can see what makes a Neapolitan pizza a Neapolitan is what we call the leoparding, the char around the crust. So you have this Cornichon that puffed up so it's nice and airy, and you look at the bottom crust, that leoparding, that char. Now if you were to use all-purpose bread flour or any other flour that isn't like a double lot pizza flour, then this char is going to be bitter. It's not going to be palatable. But because we use pizza flour in that high temp, this char has a nice smoky nuttiness to it that isn't bitter. So that's why you always want to use pizza flour. And that's the classic margherita pizza in the Neapolitan style.